The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall continue to follow me all the days of this protracted experience of death, and I will dwell in the house of the most superintelligent, power, source, and force of love and creation forever. What's happening? Benton here. I was planning to cam up for this one, and the royal rambling at you from the motel room. Actually, it's a hotel. The hotel room versus the truck. I don't know exactly in what form the trucking company may or may not receive intel from my in the truck ramblings, but since we're still in limbo as far as the job, and if I'll be going back to work, if I'll be moving back into the truck or not. That's some of what will be discussed here. So, and I don't know. Uh, that's the short answer. I don't know. They've so probably best not to try to hash this out in the truck, which is I've got it in the truck is set to I forget what opti idle. So it when the batteries run down to a certain voltage, it starts the engine, runs the engine for like 2 hours to charge the batteries. It probably does that. I don't know once it runs them down enough to need to run for 2 hours. Probably does that every 8 hours, I'm guessing. And I've got the heater running uh, in the sleeper, which I believe is diesel fired. Now, my question is, are those things designed to operate indefinitely? Because I turned it on, I guess that would be yesterday. What's today? Thursday? Yes, yesterday around 9 a.m. No, before that, 8 a.m., 7:30 a.m. Yeah. So we're now, what we see here is I've gotten so fatigued and I've ran myself so ragged that I haven't gotten, I won't even say that I haven't gotten proper rest. I'm going through a lot of mental fog, I guess would be the best way to put it. Um, Not necessarily in a bad way. I think where we're at is I've reached my limit and I need to just do nothing. So what I've been doing is sitting around, putzing around the room, sort of sorting through my belongings from time to time, and uh, listening to whatever on my phone, and then shopping on Amazon. So I'm able to receive Amazon packages here at the hotel. So I believe there's a delivery arriving today, and then Saturday as well. And I've spent several hours today researching power banks, and I think I'm going to order some more expensive, high quality USB Type C cables. We used to have the hot cell phone talk. Now we have the, I guess we're going to have the hot power bank and uh, charging cable talk. A shout out to the chat. Not reading the chat right now. Hopefully, we're not being. I'll peep over there real quick just to make sure we're not being spiritually attacked. Nope, no spiritual attacks at this time. And have I even, and see, this is where the mental fog comes in, and we'll get back to the hot power bank talk here shortly, but, and, wall chargers, and I bought a wall charger and a power bank not too long ago, just kind of impulse purchase. Probably could have made some better choices on that, but I think it'll work out in the long run. And then I realized, so I'm trying to remember when was the last time I live streamed. I don't think I've live streamed since I made the delivery in northern Wisconsin. I can't remember, or maybe I have. That's curious. Snowmobiles crossing the highway. That's how far north into Wisconsin we got. They're tired of the snow. They said they got a couple of more months of snow most likely up there, and I think it probably snowed 2 inches on me in the last 2 hours of my drive. And we got the freight off the truck, and then I went and dropped the trailer. And again, if this is a repeat, bear with me. I can't remember. I ended up paying $100 for a week of paid parking, about 30 minutes from the hotel. And then I got spiritually attacked by the owner of the company, who I guess was watching all of my movements, because somewhat hilariously, in retrospect, he was trying to strong arm me into, in the course of convincing me to, because at first I wasn't even going to bother to deliver the third drop. I was just going to have him. If folks remember, I had actually parked the truck and trailer at a little quick trip truck stop, not too far, about 5 miles from here. Is that right? Yeah, about 5 miles, maybe even closer than that. Yeah, about 5 miles from here. And was just going to have them come pick it up. And then it was the whole them trying to get me to move back into me telling them, while I moved out of the truck into the hotel, paid for a whole week. And they're basically like, well, can you get a refund? And I'm like, well, I paid them cash. I doubt it, but who knows? And then they're talking about maybe just reimbursing me for like half of the money if they could get me to go back to work. I mean, it's hilarious. Trucking is just, I don't even know what to say at this point. I guess we all know. The regular viewers / listeners and myself, I guess we know what it is by now, right? Yeah, there you go. Still plowing snow, indeed. It was funny because, I don't think the company even really realizes how much snow some of these areas get. And then I think maybe the last few winters, it hasn't snowed as much as, like a heavy winter. Because they can see my camera, my front dash camera. And so when I made it to the delivery, they were like, yeah, we're looking at your camera. And do they just not like plow the snow up there? I said, oh, they do. It's just how much it snows here. And it never gets warm enough to melt. And in fact, they didn't have a dock at this third drop. And I, managed to back into this alleyway. And they were out there with the snow shovels and the putting the salt down, to clear the parking lot enough to safely be able to to manually unload the truck. I'm from Arkansas. I don't know anything about that life. Don't know the first thing about it. We're going inside. I walked inside the building a couple of times, and I noticed that I'm the only one tracking snow in and out. I guess they're just trained to, whatever specific feet movements need to happen so that by the time the person walks indoors, there's absolutely no snow on their shoes. I don't know how to do that. So I'm just like, yeah, you got some crazy southerner in here tracking snow everywhere. I don't know what to tell you. I'm just laughing at myself the whole time. It's pretty funny. And I do like driving a truck in the winter. And for whatever reason, other than my rookie season, my rookie winter, um, the times I've driven in the winter, I've gotten really fortunate with where I've been sent at what time. I was in the Northeast, but then I left there like 2 days before this big nor'easter hit. And because sometimes when the snow gets heavy enough, you just can't really go anywhere, at least for maybe a whole day, day and a half, or whatever. And I've been in that. That happened to me in Michigan. I pretty much just couldn't go anywhere for like 16 hours. It was a literal lake effect snow blizzard conditions. And I knew, as soon as it stopped snowing, they'd be out with the snow plows, and that's what happened. So, I timed it out to where I hit the road like 6 a.m. and the plows were out and everything was fine. Um, yeah, that's kind of a trip. So, in the sort of the course of all of these ongoing discussions, they're talking about, oh well, you can take, and now it's their idea, right? Everything I'm just doing, that I'm not giving them an option. It's all their. And maybe they listen to this channel. Who the fuck knows at this point? Anything's possible. Do I even need to worry about being in the truck or not? But maybe their sophisticated AI systems, automatically keep them apprised of my live streams. I don't even care at this point. And I have some thoughts on economics with respect to working a job and the boomer mindset. My father, I've been emailing with my father quite comically, in my opinion, some of which has had to do with finances, earning an income and such. And then now I actually have more money than he has now, which is hilarious because, he used to have a decent net worth and I never did. Now he has effectively no money as far as I can tell, or he's doing a good job of hiding it, which I don't believe is the case, but it could be. It's possible. And, whatever little bit of money I have is a lot more than he has, apparently. So he sent me an email I told him I'd saved up 20 G's because once I get paid tonight, I'll have 20 G's liquid. And so he's like, here's my unsolicited advice. And I didn't say anything, but I was thinking to myself, why would I take the advice of somebody who has less money than me? This doesn't make any sense. It's like taking financial advice from a homeless person. Shout out to the chat. So yeah, I've mostly just been recovering, and I'll get back to the spiritual attacks here in a minute when the owner is watching me like a hawk. Yep, I'm fumbling the stream. Viewership is down. Oh well, eight's about 5 to 6 more than I usually talk to at a time here lately. Like 14 when I was cammed the other day. Thursday, so I'm off Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I guess, and then hypothetically they seem to think I'm coming back to work, which I might. I mean, who knows at this point? I was looking at maybe if I decided to just go ahead and quit renting a car for a month. And what I'm realizing is I don't think they'll. I think I would need to be in Arkansas to rent a car. Since I don't have a proper bank account. Although technically, I think that is considered. Even though it's a prepaid debit card, I think it's a proper checking account. It's, associated with a bank, so it's kind of a gray area. But I was looking through the regulations on the site. Basically, it's unclear. I could reserve it on Expedia. I can rent like a compact SUV, which is really just a tiny. It's a fucking hatchback. It's a crossover. It's a hatchback, four-door hatchback. It's a Nissan Versa with a higher ride height, larger wheels and tires. Let's just call it what it is. That's has more styling. It's not really an issue. That's all right. Getting annoyed. The automotive industries. I'm allowing the existence of the automobile industry in 2026 to annoy me slightly. This is what I mean. This is unusual. Normally not. Lately, I'm not this easily frustrated by my own discourse. Shut the fuck out. Chill out. And then it's like, okay, am I really going to try to buy a car? It's like, yeah, I could. There's some pretty decent options in Chicago for around Mac. I'd say $4,000. I could get a fairly decent ride, and it's always a roll of the dice. But where I'm not interested in buying gas is one thing on a rental, but when you start getting into maintenance, oil changes, tires, insurance, I just almost entirely lost interest. And that's where we got with the company when they sent me to this impossible for me, dock to hit. That I understand. A lot of drivers are able to hit it. Although, and I don't know if this was hyperbole, the fellow that they called in from supposedly Tennessee to save the day and put the trailer in the dock. Uh, he said he'd been driving trucks for 20 years and that this was the most challenging dock he'd ever faced. That's what he said. I don't know. Because apparently he's delivered there a couple of times. So I guess they wanted to make sure and only send somebody that had actually delivered there. Whatever. And I think at this point, if I do choose to continue to allow them to employ me as a contractor, they've pretty much figured out where I'm at with the backing. And if they forget, if they just don't notice they're sending me to some super challenging place, which is typically going to be one of our dedicated customers, that's just kind of on them. So I glitch out. I'm just going to start glitching out, and there's always a chance I'll miracle it up in there. And, otherwise it is what it is. They seem willing to not fire me over it. And, other than that, I'm not working past about 4 p.m. if I do choose to continue driving this truck. And again, let's sort of back burner the spiritual attack. I know I'm going to talk about that at some point. I almost went live to talk about it. I was shaking my head. It kind of fucked me up, man. If I'm honest, it fucked me up a little bit. Probably mostly because the fog, right? The weapon temporarily formed, but it did not prosper, thankfully. But the weapon certainly formed. Short term. Woke up out of a dead sleep at like 11:30 p.m. It was night, morning time for me, but it was still the same day. I go to sleep so early. A lot of times I wake up still the same. I feel like I could go to sleep right now. You know, sleep at noon. It's not even noon yet. This is insane. I'll be waking up at 6 p.m. Although there is a poker room nearby. So, we bring my happy ass to the poker room. So, not early in the morning, but in the morning it was like going to cost me, I think, $27. And y'all know I tip, so that's another $10 because I waited tables. I'm going to tip them at least five in cash, and if I'm tipping, I mean, I might as well just give them. Really, what's a $5? What's a $5 bill these days? You know, so that's economics. And as we know, the major reason I even do long haul trucking is to live in the truck, and a big part of that is to be able to go to sleep when I want to go to sleep. Insanely early. I'm happy being a homeless person, except um, without traveling place to place, it's difficult to post up in an urban area without moving around and go to sleep at 5 p.m. I've done it. It's doable in certain areas, but everywhere is seasonal for sleeping outside. There's not really year-round places. Try to sleep outside in LA and go to sleep at 5 p.m. Maybe a rooftop somewhere. And then I'm realizing more and more how wedded I am to these belongings. So much as I began to view having an automobile as a burden, more and more I'm seeing these items as a burden because it finally struck me that I probably, although I may be able to, it's just unclear, but it's certainly it's, it's somewhat likely that I just won't be able to rent a car. We don't need any problem solving in the chat. Just FYI. Also not certified, so it's just I guess anyway. Right. Yeah, looking around at these possessions, a lot of which such. Uh, so when I'm thinking about now we're going to be talking about getting on a flight somewhere or bring help us just duffel bag and maybe two bags and a carry-on, right? That's like I can't even get down to that. Basically, my sleeping bag and two blankets is almost my clothes. I have to get rid of some of them, and then pretty much my backpack fit. That's it. I'm really and a very small selection of supplements. Certainly not going to be carrying around a very certain various powders. Although I've never gone rolly cart, I guess I could always just like find dollars, whatever. Not on a Greyhound bus, but maybe a city bus. There just back there to sleep. Modern so life is not. So as we see, modern so-called life, it's subsistence, minimum is to be involved in economics such that if the individual is able to earn a sufficient amount of money, then they're highly incentivized to do so, such as truck driving, which I would never recommend anybody make most bills. And then even then I realized in saving up $20,000, I spent almost that amount of money in, so this will be my 20th paycheck. So let's just call it 19 paychecks because I'm taking a few days off here and there. So let's say I've worked 20 full weeks. I've been on the job 20 weeks. I've been 19 weeks worth of work. Maybe 18. I think I calculated earlier. So I'm spending about $700 a week. It sounds like a lot when a person doesn't have really bills, right? But it's almost $100 a day. Is that really, if you look at the economics and the inflation and life on the road being somewhat more expensive in certain ways, I guess that's probably about right. Could I cut it down some? Sure. To what? 75 a day? Especially since I spend a lot of so it's not unnecessary. I'll probably have supplements. Why work if I'm not going to be able to buy the stuff that I want to have? And especially fog, exhaustion, and fatigue comes into the picture. In some ways, it makes it a little bit easier as the mind is still attempting to analyze, process the data, problem solve. It actually becomes a little easier to see the ridiculousness of the way that science is structured. I heard Adam Carolla, this was like 20 years ago, probably. He figured out that he recognized his own very frugal nature, and as much as he would want to have his wife and his children sort of frugality and efficiency and not be wasteful, he realized that it was just easier for him to make a fuck ton of money and just spend it on whatever for his family. And then, he's into certain things that are expensive, race cars, warehouses. I think he owns warehouses. Of course, the cars have only basically it's a hobby that pays for itself the way he's done it. There's no guarantee, but the cars appreciate not enough to represent some wonderful high cost associated with storing insurance and acquiring. However, they do pay for themselves in the long run. That's interesting. And I think that's where I'm at on a very limited scale compared to somebody like that. Look at this again, not rich. Not a rich guy, but far from it. But compared to a lot of the people I see, am I being bored? I guess so. Oh, are we cutting out? Yeah, I meant to mention this. I think we're having some connection problems. So switch over to the main phone. What happens when you get network congestion is they pretty much stop hotspot. So hang on. All right, we're back. I think it'll probably work on the main phone. Yeah, network connectivity issues. And the thing is, with 20 G's liquid, um, I can quit the job anytime, and yeah, I'll end up probably spending $5 grand to try to figure out, maybe buy a car, maybe do this, maybe do that. But at the end of the day, I could fuck off for a month or two and still have pretty close to 10 G's. And obviously, the more I continue working, then that amount increases, by about a grand a week. But which sounds like a lot of money. And I think this is kind of the point Corolla was making. $1,000 a week, it still sounds like a decent amount of money if you're talking about saving that. I don't think it is, man. I don't think that's a lot of money. So I'll transition into the boomer mindset side of things. My father, with the boomer mindset, at 70 years old, to him, $20,000 is still like a stake of money to go do something with. And, maybe, and so that's why I don't recall, I didn't even really bother to read whatever he sent me with the unsolicited financial advice, but, whatever he typed out, I'm sure in as late as 2010 probably made sense. And 2026 is 20 grand is not enough money to really do anything with unless the person keeps working and doing what they're already doing to have saved up the 20 grand, at which point the 20 grand just becomes a tool to, okay, we'll just throw this into the market, or we'll throw it into, certainly not precious metals at this point, because here's the thing is, and see, I was specific. I said $20,000 liquid. Well, the moment we start buying gold and silver, we're not liquid anymore. And I don't know that he specifically mentioned gold or silver. That's not the point. Although he did try to say something about, some version of a digital dollar or whatever, which is, again, most of the money's digital now anyway. I mean, what's the fucking difference? And hilariously, he's like, trying to say, oh, and, I wouldn't keep any of my money in the bank. And I'm just like, that's the only thing I responded to was like, I stopped using banks shortly after, actually before the financial crisis, I stopped using banks. And, yeah, I have these prepaid debit cards, but, you know, um, most of my money's liquid. And yeah, it would suck if I woke up tomorrow and whatever happens to be in my account was gone. But again, let's just say it's, $6,800. Is that really some, it would suck, but is that really some huge fucking ordeal if I just woke up tomorrow and my $6,800 is gone? Because if you think about just pause time, right? Pause income, even if a person's frugal, how long can one person live on $6,800 without any more money coming in? Not very fucking long, man. As a if I went to LA and I know, where I can access some resources, and I know that they're actively trying to put people into what they call housing, which isn't really housing in the first place, that yeah, I can have some sort of roof over my head and maybe, a door that I can lock and it won't cost me any money. The trade-off will be great, of course, and then, but if you just look at what basic necessities cost, you know, you, you'd be lucky to survive 6 months off of that, right? Um, and that's somebody who already kind of knows how to live that life. So yeah, again, I would prefer not to wake up tomorrow and it's just like, oh, they've switched off of the USD and now it's this other thing. And, the like in the movie Blow, your funds have been appropriated. They've nationalized the banks and your funds have been appropriated by the government of Panama or whatever. George is just sitting there like, my 150 million's gone. They're like, yeah, pretty much. Pretty much, Bubba. The government took your cash. You thought you were money laundering. But and it's just kind of this is kind of the inverse of money laundering. And this is, I don't know how much of this I want to talk about where people might be able to overhear me, but I don't know how much of the safety risk that even is these days. But um, unless we're talking $100 bills, if a person's doing what I've been doing and just, every time I go to Walmart, I get $100 cash back. And, here and there, I'm able to, because I hate paying all these fees. So here and there, I can find an ATM where I can get up to $500 in cash out of an ATM without paying exorbitant fees. It's Zimbabwe bucks because pretty soon, what doesn't have a lot of buying power, it's like, this starts to have a little bit of heft to it if it's all in 20s. And then, like my dad's talking about, don't keep the money in the bank. Yeah, think about this. It's basically impossible without a checking account to convert your $20 bills into hundreds, and I don't want a bank account. And then, maybe it would be worth it to go to the casino because I could probably, if I went 4 days in a row, hell, I might be able to play enough poker to, start to solve that problem a little bit, cash out, buy in with 20s and cash out with hundreds. Assuming I didn't lose too much, even, and the chances of me not breaking even are pretty low, but, pretty sure I'm not going to the casino though. I'd rather just buy stuff on Amazon. But I was struck. It was kind of funny thinking about, okay, if I quit the job, I don't rent a car, then now I'm looking at having to leave a lot of my belongings behind. But then I'm thinking, well, hey, bozo, you've got like $120 in Amazon stuff, packages showing up. So, the hilarity of, looking at maybe walking away from some of these things while even more of the products are arriving, right? And isn't this, some of the issues around modernity, and a lot of this was covered in the movie Fight Club, especially the stuff around, his IKEA furniture in his apartment, Edward Norton's apartment. And while he had this corporate job, and, um, the idea the things that you own end up owning you. And, I've talked about many times in the past, how much of in a way, Fight Club was really the first big eye opener for me. Um, in '99, even more so than The Matrix, which The Matrix was, I liked it as a movie, but it really didn't, I wasn't like, wowie, wowie, this is some, it actually aged better for me, I would say, than how I reacted to it initially. But Fight Club was the, and I would say even before that, JFK, sort of opened me up to the idea of just conspiracy theories in general. Oliver Stone's JFK, since I am a, kind of a fancy boy with the films at times. I do appreciate most of the films of Oliver Stone, but hmm, that was certainly underappreciated in my opinion. Uh, Costner, right? And Kevin Costner in that, as I recall. That's probably worth a rewatch. Although now that most of us have been down all the various rabbit holes, I'm sure we could pick apart the movie. But anyway, I don't want to get off into that just now. So in a way, I'm not forced into trucking because the liquid nature of the cash and the ability to earn what's not a high income, certainly, but what not that long ago would have been considered a relatively high income. Um, and folks are starting to recognize that things have changed, but this is not in the last couple of years. I would argue that things had already changed, well before the 08, 09 financial crisis. I think what has been slow to catch up is people's attitudes and people's viewpoints with respect to how they approach the financial system. And then I won't blame the boomers individually, but we're starting to see now just how heavily programmed the boomers were and remain, and that how much of that programming and brainwashing was tied in predictive programming and all of this, and being operated by proxy. And the idea of first, the so-called American dream, and then home ownership, and at a certain point, just more or less believing that they were entitled to that, and then at a certain point, using their homes as ATMs, and hmm, decades of sort of living this consumer credit lifestyle while still being employed, and funding the little Johnny and Susie's college funds, and some people throwing their money into the stock market, the dot-com bubble, and all of these various things. And then the normalizing in the '90s of just your common average bozo, um, clicking the mouse on first clicking the mouse on their computer, and investing. And initially that was seen as sort of, you need to know what you're doing. And then at a certain point, it was just like, now everybody's just going to, willy nilly manage their own investments, which is in fucking insane as far as I'm concerned. Um, and some of my own, choosing to um, adapt and transition to a homeless lifestyle, living with a small amount of money. A lot of it is tied into these me recognizing some of these economic factors, a few years before other people, but with no notion of taking advantage of things. And certainly, this idea of the AI takeover, and it's this idea that the job market's fucked, and people begging for jobs they don't want to do in the first place. I realized in 2010, by 2010, 2011, I realized I was begging for jobs I didn't want in the first place. And then, what Gen Z isn't seeing is this idea that in 1997, that it was somehow a great thing that I could be working some low level job. And if they pissed me off or I was just over it, I could walk across the street and use my soft skills and my youthful, pleasing, affect and manner and whatever, and my own aggression and boldness. It's, somebody, I'm not going to have to go to too many places and, hey, can I talk to the manager? And somebody's going to hire me on the spot, right? And that's the proverbial, oh, you can just walk across the street. Yeah, you could walk across the street from what? A liquor store to a gas station, right? To make what? To work 40 hours for what? Enough money to have a roommate and eat out once a day at Wendy's like I was doing back then. And, go to Walmart and, not live it up, but buy my groceries. And then, if we need a shower curtain, it's like, well, probably don't get the $20 one, but here's one for $5. That'll work. Right. I mean, that's already been the program. America's been on that program or versions of that program for decades, if not longer. And I think what happens is during the so-called good times, which aren't even good times, but during the the expanding of the bubble, in the boom bust cycle, I think people become very identified with that. So now, the answer to everything, and I'll finish up on the point about Gen Z. So what Gen Z doesn't realize or seem to acknowledge is that, okay, how does Benton get the job? If they only have one job opening and it's a 22-year-old Benton or 23-year-old Benton, and he's in there aggressively selling himself. Well, what's the result of that? The result of that is I'm going to have to show up and bust my ass 40 hours a week. I don't get to walk. The person who can boldly and confidently walk in the front door and say, hey, man, I'm here. It's your lucky day. Fucking hire me. Right. And, not to say it that way, but that's the message. And it's like, you're welcome. But then at the same time, thank you for the job. Right. Thank you for the opportunity. Well, here's how I thank them for the opportunity. I show up on time. Right. I do all the work I've agreed to do. I'm a team player. I don't cause too much problems. Right. I put up with the customer believing they're always right. Gen Z ain't built for that, and it's okay that they're not built for it. But my only criticism with Gen Z would be, y'all don't want any part of that, because Gen Z sees through they see the foolishness and the folly in slaving away for corporations. Well, when Gen Z's not willing to go bust their ass in a gas station, they don't get to walk through the front door and aggressively sell themselves. Because that doesn't work. Because what is the owner or the manager going to think of somebody who showed up and conducted themselves like they're the greatest things since sliced bread, but then they're calling in, they're showing up late, they're not coming to work half the time, and you can't hardly get them to clean the toilet. Like Benton's showing up for every motherfucking shift on time. And if you have him, if you try to have him work like I did in the gas station, they tried to have me mostly working, you know, like 3 to 11. But then at one point they had me work like one overnight shift. And then at a certain point, it's just they're testing to see what I'll do. And it's like, that was fine in a vacuum. But then a couple of days later, they're having me come in at 6 in the morning. And I'm basically like, yeah, no more of that. That's the first and only overnight shift I ever worked. And it's like, okay, I can deal with if y'all need me to come in at 6 in the morning every once in a while, but I'm mostly here for that 3, because remember what's going to happen. If Benton shows up for all his shifts and he busts his ass and he cleans the toilet, whether literally, metaphorically, or both, they can't give him, if they give him one overnight and he's like, okay, in the spirit of helping the team, he does it and it wrecks his whole fucking schedule. And he's just like, hey man, I'm not working overnights. You're going to have to, I was willing to do that one until y'all find somebody to work the graveyard, but I'm done. And then it's like, can they have me work a 3 to 11, then have one day off and then bring me in at 6 a.m.? See, well, how many times can they do that to me before I do what, Gen Z? Walk across the street and aggressively sell myself and get hired. And why are they going to hire me across the street? Because I'm going to show up for every shift and I'm going to bust my ass and I'm going to clean the toilets. But they're still going to try to get me to do a bunch of bullshit. See what I mean? And so Gen Z somehow thinks that was an entitlement, when I was willing to do those things. It wasn't. That was me forcing myself to do a bunch of bullshit I didn't want to do. Just like the boomers forced themselves to do a bunch of bullshit they didn't want to do. So the Gen X version of you get to walk in the front door and aggressively sell yourself and have a job, as long as you then follow through on your own sales job, because you would seem like a psychopath to, aggressively sell yourself and then just be a piece of shit on the job, right? Because typically the people who are going to mail it in, they just go around town and they're the, hey, can I have an application people? And they just take 100, they take 20 applications and they go home and fill them out and bring them back the next day. And then they get a few interviews and just whoever hires them, they show up and call, they show up for 20%, they show up for 80% of their shifts and they're late some of the time and they just wander around and pretend to work. See, which is kind of what Gen Z does. And so the boomer version of, and not all of them, but, and good on them, because that's giving the that's actually treating the employer, that's treating the job like it deserves to be treated based on the wages and the benefits. It's to just, yeah, we'll just apply for every retail job in town, and then, whoever brings us in for an interview, we'll just sort of half-ass it, and then we'll just kind of go through the motions, right? And that's always existed. But so the boomer version of this was they sold themselves in the interview. They showed up and did their best, and then they showed up for all their shifts. They took it seriously. They worked hard, but they never worked more than 40 hours unless they wanted overtime. So boomers still live in a world where it's a 40-hour work week, right? Now, Gen X came along and was like, oh yeah, we can absolutely get by on 40 hours if we're willing to live frugally and have a roommate, and maybe we can go have lunch at Wendy's and we can have groceries in the cupboard, right? And we can buy clothes. We may not be able to buy the latest fashions, but we can have clothes. We can have a modest automobile. We can put gas in our modest automobile. We can afford the car insurance. We can afford to change the oil. on one low level 40-hour job. That wasn't a glorious existence, Gen Z. And I know Gen Z doesn't listen to this. That wasn't some glorious fucking charmed life. That was a, hey man, if I have to go to work and bust my ass for 40 hours, I'd really like to get something out of it. And then that was sort of the version of, okay, now Benton's studying for his Microsoft certified systems engineer. Now he's certified. Now he's sending his fucking resume and cover letter all around town. And, so I sent a cover letter and a resume to every computer related business in the area. And I got, I think, 3 interviews and 1 job. And isn't that the modern equivalent of, oh, now we go on Indeed and whatever all these platforms are? I've never used any of them. And now we apply for 5,000 jobs to get, you know, contacted by 10 of them, and then to then go through a multi-step hellacious, to be interviewed 5 times, right? To go through this long, or just an extremely long onboarding process, and to get ghosted at some point along the way, right? Yeah, I get it. And then whatever the job is pays $16 an hour, and you don't even get 40 hours anymore, right? Because they're not going to pay benefits, because the corporate shit has that, so you're not even going to get 40 hours unless you really go in there and bust your ass and kiss up and maybe have to become a manager or whatever. Or now it's okay, the main job, and then whatever part-time job you can maybe do without, because it can interfere with the first job, because the first job is corporate. They're not putting up with that bullshit. They're not having that. It's just you might get lucky enough to have enough of a steady schedule to then moonlight, as we used to call it. And then it's going to be like the guy who delivered my Walmart groceries this morning, who's he's going to the super center. Maybe he's going to multiple super centers. Because this is the first time I haven't paid the rush fee or whatever. I just did the regular $10 delivery because I don't use it enough to pay for the membership. And I don't have a house. If I could get the free shipping to my house, it'd probably be worth it. But because they do have a few deals on Walmart, their website. But it's just not worth it to me not having a fixed address. But this is the first time I've just done the regular $10. I've been kind of spoiled. I've only ever, in trucking, it's like, well, I'm just gonna have to do the rush fee, and it'll be here in an hour. Well, they can only do one at a time on that. But this is like the only way for these people to make this work. They got to do multiple. Who knows how many deliveries he picked up. And so he's an immigrant, of course, and he's telling me from Venezuela, and of course the American government has done. I won't even get into whatever's going on over there, but neither here nor there. We got our own problems, America, right? So, I tipped him $10 because what better use of my $10 than to just give it to a person? Here, it's 10. What am I going to do with it? I'm not going to, unlike what my boomer father seems to think, it's not going to be part of me securing my financial future, Pops. Meanwhile, how'd that work out for you, buddy? You going to advise me on something that you couldn't successfully maneuver your way through? Because the fact is, he had a high net worth for a long time. I never did, but I'm on track to do way better than him financially over the course of my adult life. Because if you look at this crash landing he's making, into his old age, it's his fucking disaster. Him and my mom. My mom's got a job, for fuck's sakes. At least my dad's not having to work, but crazy. I bet whatever woman he's living with has a job, but that's kind of another matter. And that's not even my business anyway. But so we see, it's, if you look at generationally, um, people are living, the generations are kind of having completely different experiences in some ways. Now, part of Gen Z not going for the corporate bullshit, part of this is, I think, their version of, you know, the Gen X 90s, just, walk in the front door and they'll hire you on the spot. Is Gen Z seems to think that if they get education and they, do whatever the corporation asks of them, that they will then be rewarded with the loyalty of the corporation. Whereas Gen X and the cynicism, right, and the the movie Reality Bites, the sarcasm, the sardonic wit, that, and to me that's the encapsulation of the Gen X sort of attitude and ethos is that movie, Reality Bites. And Ethan Hawke, Winona Ryder, I think Ben Stiller was in. I didn't even know who Ben Stiller was at the time. I think he's in it. And of course, I was mostly paying attention to Winona, Miss Ryder, of course, but and not because I wanted to bang her. Although, well, yeah, of course, she's attractive. But I've always, as I've noted on here, I've always had an interest and fascination, and in some ways identified with female characters in fiction for whatever reason. But not to want to have those experiences. I've just always found them interesting, for whatever reason. So Gen X, we understood that, oh, like they really are doing this thing. Like there was a movie, and I forget the movie, but there was an '80s movie. Like there was a lot of this stuff around the outsourcing of jobs. In the pre-NAFTA era. In the neoliberal, in the early stages of so-called neoliberalism, and sort of the ramp up, and the idea that like some of this stuff in the movies was like Japanese themed, but I've forgotten some of the details. But I think some of it was predictive programming, but it was like showing us what's Japanese Americans or maybe people from Japan were coming here and trying to enter the corporate space. It was kind of confusing looking back on it, but ultimately it transitioned into this idea of the jobs are getting outsourced. And now a lot of the workers in the manufacturing sectors, I think a lot of that was tied into car. What it was the Rust Belt. Now that I think about it, it was the Rust Belt and automotive manufacturing, but then the rise of Japan, who was second only to the U.S. in GDP, gross domestic products for a long time, and they had a much larger economy than China for a long time too. Japan did. It was sort of using them, I think, as a proxy for their own work and management style and their own culture over there, and then that sort of meshing and intermixing with American culture, an amalgamation, and then the idea of Americans actually training their replacements who might be migrants or immigrants, or at least the corporation. Okay, now an American corporation that maybe supplies auto parts to GM, they're being bought out by a Japanese corporation. And then now here's the Japanese, management is taking over. And then it's next thing you know, it's a version of the white people are having to train the Japanese people, or at least show them the procedures, And I sort of lost my greater point, but I think it's certainly implied enough that the very astute audience would be able to pick up on that. Are we being spiritually attacked? I'm going to turn off the chat if I'm being spiritually attacked. All right, we're good so far. We're good so far. I mean, y'all are getting sidetracked in the comments, but that's completely fine. I'm not even reading them, so have fun. But those are tangents, and I like to go on. I like to be the one introducing tangents, not the chat. It's getting non sequitorial down there, if that's even a word. If it ain't, it ought to be non sequitorial down there. Let me check the batteries. Where are we at here? 51%. We're doing all right. And so the Gen X thing was we understood very sarcastically and sardonically and sort of almost like a dark humor type of way that there is no job security. We understood, oh, that doesn't exist. Boomers mostly lived a life of job security. We understood very early on, oh, there is no such thing. And for some insane reason, Gen Z seems to think that if they do everything they're told, they'll somehow just be treated with loyalty by the system, which is just to a Gen Xer, we're just like, oh, y'all are out of your fucking minds. Like, what would ever give you that idea? And I would say Gen X probably failed in some ways. Now if we had tried to tell Gen Z, I don't know, would they have believed us? But certainly many of them, I see them on, not that I go to social media, but I see enough of this content that, ends up trickling down and finding its way to me that a lot of them are very disturbed and they get their feelings hurt when next thing you know, they're on TikTok or whatever talking about, oh, I did everything I was told to do and did all the right things. And they've just, only to be discarded like a piece of garbage. And then we're like, the Reality Bites generation is like, yeah, what the fuck did you think was going to happen? Like, why would you think it would be any different? That we grew up in that. We were able, a big part of the Winona Ryder, Ethan Hawke ethos was, I think Ethan Hawke in all of those Gen X movies, you had maybe like one or two people that had good jobs, and then everybody else had low-level bullshit jobs that they actually mostly worked hard at. That did pay their rent, it did put gas in their car, and it did put groceries in the cupboard, and they could go, they could go have a fast food meal. There certainly wasn't all this coffee culture and the things that I enjoy that Gen Z's kind of into, the idea of avocado toast and all of these things. There wasn't any money for that. Like, why do you think there were no $5 cups of coffee when Gen X was here? Because we wouldn't. It wasn't possible. It's like, what are you talking about? We don't have, $5 for a cup of coffee. It's insane. We just don't have it, right? And whoever made enough money to afford it back then, the coffee culture wasn't there yet. Now Gen Z wants to go, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, by the way. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Gen Z because this is what they were taught. This is a consumer society. Starbucks is the number 2 restaurant, second only to McDonald's in total sales. To them, it's normal. To Gen Z, it's normal to go on their way to their $16 an hour job and spend $8 on a latte or whatever. Or, what's it going to cost if they think they're going to actually get some food at Starbucks on their way to work? It's $12. Right? And I'm not saying it's not moral that, boomers want to turn everything into a morality. It's like, no, it's not that. It's, there was no version of, now if somebody lived in New York City or whatever, yeah, I'm sure it was very different. But Gen X growing up in Arkansas, it was like, yeah, some people like to go to the convenience store, but there's nothing in there that cost nothing was expensive. Now, to look back on that and romanticize that is insane because I grew up in a convenience store. in Arkansas. My dad owned it, and when I look back at what the customers were buying, it wasn't any great fucking privilege to be able to work, to only work 40 hours and to be able to go to a convenience store multiple times a day for packs of cigarettes, a 6-pack of beer on the way home, you know, a little Debbie snack cake, right? Uh, you know, maybe a piece of chicken and some JoJo's, right? I mean, what are we talking about here? This ain't living, folks. You know, that's subsisting. And and Mountain Dew, you know, soda pop and specifically Mountain Dew, which outsold everything else 10-1. You couldn't keep the fucking Mountain Dew on the shelf. I know because I stocked the cooler a lot. You know, we damn near had an entire door of Mountain Dew. It outsold everything. It was insane how much Mountain Dew we sold. I myself drank Mountain Dew back then, not exclusively, but I was a Mountain Dew drinker. Yeah, and that says a lot about American culture, and it says a lot about the ways in which society is programmed through advertising and marketing. That by my second year of college, I was drinking a 3 liter of Mountain Dew every day. So, which does say something about my own frugal nature. It's like, oh, how much was a 3 liter at Walmart in 1996 or 1995? I don't know, $1.50, right? What, am I insane enough to look back and say that was the good old times? That I was drinking 3 liters of Mountain Dew a day? That was the good. Are you nuts? You go drink 3 liters of Mountain Dew every day and tell me how you feel. Right? Are you crazy? Right? And then at a certain point, you know, they stopped making 3 liters. And it was we were kind of confused, like, hey, where'd the 3 liters go? And then that next thing you know, people are walking around with, first it was 20-ounce bottles. Because see, to the person who would drink 3 liters of Mountain Dew for $1.50, at a certain point, it's like, oh my God, a 20 ounce is, because we bought 12-ounce cans. And then if you really thought you were going to have an experience, you get the, you know, every once in a while, the 8-ounce Coke in a glass bottle or whatever. But, you know, we did 12-ounce cans out of the gas station. And the next thing you know, it's 20-ounce, it's 20-ounce plastic bottles. And then what was it after that? 1 liter. Now, how much was a 1 liter? It's probably the same cost as a 3 liter. So the next thing you know, no more 3 liters. And then it's 2 liters of Pepsi for 88 cents at Walmart for years. And that's a lost leader. And, you know, your dozen eggs was 68 cents. But Walmart paid more than 68 cents for the eggs. And then they worked a deal with Coca-Cola and Pepsi to sell, to be able, somebody's taking an L, probably Pepsi and Coke are taking an L, so that just to keep you drinking soda, because they know at some point you're going to be on a road trip or you're going to be out of your normal routine and you're going to go in the gas station. And if you're Benton, you're going to get the can of Coke in a 12-ounce. And then most people are going to get the 20-ounce. And then some people are just going to drink between 1 and 3 1 liters a day out of the gas station. And those were the people who used to get them at Walmart in a 3-liter bottle and keep them in their own fridge. But even then, you're sort of risking, like, can you even get through the whole thing before it goes flat? And are the roommates going to try to get at it? It's like, now I'm trying to buy a dorm fridge and put it in my fucking room in my 4-bedroom apartment, you know, with 3 roommates, folks. That was my one of my first apartments. Was in college. I had 3 roommates. So this idea that the 90s were fantastic, well, they kind of were in a way. Guess what? 2026 is kind of fantastic in certain ways. Of course it is. If you can see it and appreciate it for what it is, right? Oh, you're good, Scuba. Thanks for listening. Um, and I don't know if how long you've listened to me, but I used to be way more crotchety than this. So um, I don't mean any offense. So, but thanks for swinging by. I do appreciate it. Historically, I'm quite hard on the audience and quite critical of the chat. So I'm way less critical and way less harsh these days, but it's just how I am. I don't know what else to say. I'm very critical by nature, so it is what it is. Can't change it. It's all the Virgo, but I don't want to get into. But sun, sun's in a fire sign with a shit ton of Virgo. Either way, quite critical. But we don't need to get into astrology, especially not my astrology. But yeah, and so it's fun to think about those things. And so to tie this in with the theme of, I'm really seeing now that society is structured for, now it's more individual. So individuals are going to have to figure out how to make more money and more money and more money, but they're never going to get rich. If they're Gen Z, a lot of them are never going to own a home. If they're Gen Z, a lot of them are never, or by the time they leave their parents' home, they're going to be 40. They're literally going to be 40. And it's only going to be because they woke up one day and said, wow, I'm 32. I've never lived on my own. I still live with mommy and daddy. And it's going to take them years to figure out how to get out of mommy and daddy's house. Our thing was Gen X in Arkansas was, oh, we can't wait to leave home. And if for some insane reason we tried to hang out, our parents would have said, hey, you got to get the fuck up out of here. Right. Off you go. And somebody will hire you. And even if you're lazy and you just wander around and pretend to work, somebody will employ you. Right. Just do the minimum. Right. And then the will you bust your ass basically the bust your ass and sell yourself is just, well, I want to have a specific type of job. I want to, still thought I was an extrovert at the time. That's how brainwashed I was. I wanted to be able to talk to people and, do certain things on the job. I wanted, and that was a preference. And some people can't show up and just wander around and pretend to work. I'm not able to do, because my thing is like, why would I even come here to just, it doesn't make sense. I'm not going to come down here to pretend to work. So, when I worked at the Walmart Supercenter and I busted my ass during the probationary period, only to have them give me like a 10 cent an hour raise. And I said, oh, okay, well, I see what this is. I didn't pretend to work. I worked in the pet department. And what I did was, and it was a very busy store, and we sold, I think at one point they told us we were like the number 2 pet department in the country, which meant we sold the second most Olroy dog food and fucking cat food and cat litter. So I showed up and I went and made a list of everything that was missing from the shelf. And then I went in the back and I got a cart, and because even though I was 130 pounds, I was pretty fucking strong for my size. And then I loaded up all the big bags of dog food. I could pick up 3 50-pound bags of Olroy. I think they're 40s now, but they were 50s back then. I think we might even have 55s. I could pick 3 of them up, which weighed more than me. But, I couldn't do it easily, but I could grab a couple at a time and throw them onto a cart, wheel them out there, stock the shelves. Then I went and sat in the break room and just sat there and listened to the intercom. Because if they called for live fish, I'd have to go catch the live fish for people, put them in a bag and all that. And every once in a while, I'll get paged over there to answer people's questions. So maybe once an hour, I just kind of wander around and see what's going on. And, somebody actually, because I didn't know anything about aquariums and all that, but I kind of got interested in it. I thought it was cool at a certain point. So, I might want to chat with somebody about the fish stuff. And I think we might have had hamsters. I don't think I ever had to fuck with the hamsters though, or whatever. Maybe they had some of that. I don't even remember. And at that age, if I didn't want to, I just would probably just refuse to fuck with them. I don't know if we even had hamsters. Probably didn't, but maybe. Probably just sold the cages, but not the actual hamsters. But anyway, um, and then like an hour before I was to go home, I would go back out and make another list and load up another cart or two, slam everything full, and fucking go home. Right. And that's basically what they were paying me to do. Right. Now I was willing to bust my ass and do the best job possible until I realized, oh, this is what they think of me, and it's 10 cents an hour. So that's fine, except now I'm gonna give them the amount of work that they're paying for. But I'm still not able to pretend to work. I'm literally sitting in the break room, and the management never was like, hey, what have you been doing for the last hour? I would have just been like, I've been in the break room. They've been like, what the fuck are you doing in the break room? I was like, it would have even made sense to me, you know. And I think they probably realized, well, he comes in, he stocks everything to the max, right? I face everything up, I make it all look good, and then I go sit in the break room. Every single time they call for somebody to go catch a fish, I go catch the fish, meaning the manager doesn't have to eventually get called down there. And then the people are like, he's like, where's the pet department guy? They're like, we don't know. We can't find him. Like, I always, every time, went and caught the fish. So they're not going to say to me, why are you sitting in the break room? It's like, what do you mean? Why am I sitting in the break room? Because there's nothing for me to do. Oh, well, you could go do, yeah, I could do a lot of things. I'm sitting in the fucking break room. You know, yeah, I can do lots of stuff, but I'm sitting here. Now, I guess if you directly order me to go do this, that, and the third, I might go do it. I might not. But yeah, and my personality is if they're like, hey, man, we really need your help over in another department. Okay, yeah, man, sure. Be happy to help. That's how I am. But what I'm not going to do is wander around pretending to work. That's crazy. That never made sense to me because it's like at that point, why would I even come here if I'm going to walk around and pretend to work? What's up, Jay? Good to see you, man. And then eventually, went into something I was interested in that didn't really pay that well, but it paid better, right? I made the equivalent. So I went from making, eventually I got to where I could make like $8 an hour. Again, Walmart was paying me like $6.10 an hour or whatever. Minimum wage was $5.75. Maybe I was making $6.50 at Walmart, and then gas station might have paid me $7.50. And if I wanted to go work at Brahms and do fast food or whatever, I could make like $8.25. And then at a certain point, I worked in a factory and wasn't a huge fan of that. Made $10 an hour and with the opportunity for overtime, but it was like I just wasn't into it, man. I was like, no, man, this is and I didn't really have that work ethic yet. My dad made me work with him enough as a teenager that I know how to show up and do some things. I didn't have an actual like, oh, I'm going to clock in and we're going to work the whole time. I didn't have that yet. And in fact, I don't think convenience store, I developed it because there's no choice. It was a busy store and I had to check people out the whole time. And, I still didn't like it. I didn't like having to work the whole time, but I mean, it's like, well, it's the only way to work there. I don't have the option. It's the only way to have that job. So again, because remember, I aggressively sold myself, and in order to get the job in the first place, because believe it or not, a lot of people like want to work at a convenience store. for whatever reason, those jobs are sought after to some extent. I'm sure to this day, maybe even more so now. I don't know, but although putting up with the general public that's gotten worse. They're certainly worse to deal with than in the past, I would say, in a lot of ways. But maybe not. I don't know. It's hard to say. I think I'm annoying myself again. What's going on? Hang on. I think this might be the release of some stress and tension out of my tissues here. 'Cause, yeah, I can see my breathing has changed a little bit. So I think, yeah, this is some of the healing. Yeah, definitely. It's good stuff. Yeah, it's I've realized now that I do have some old stress and tension that due to working all those years that never quite processed, and some of it's and a lot of it was customer service related. Certainly, um, I put myself through the ringer doing a lot of customer service for a lot of years, and then eventually got in. In college, I got interested in computers, and eventually got certified. And in fact, I started working in the computer lab at the college, but that didn't pay anything, and I couldn't get more than a certain number of hours. That was very competitive, and as far as getting hours, and um, the most I ever made in IT was 33,000 a year. Of course, it was 33, right? Here's your waking dream, surrealistic, unreality, deja vu all over again. Rears its ugly head, but. I might go have some tacos. What time is it? It's 1 p.m. I don't know. I might go have some tacos. I don't know if I even want to talk about the job situation at this point. Um, but I think the major thing about trucking is I think I'm going through this long-winded discussion of economics and the history of the recent decades and how the generations approach these things differently. That my father's view of me having 20K liquid, for me, that's just I view the 20 the same way I viewed the 10,000 that I initially. So basically, my first year in trucking, I bought a car for 3,000 and, lived on the road and insured the car, titled it, insured it. It didn't really need anything put into it. Maybe, aligned it and put a set of tires on it, maybe change the oil a few times, nothing basically. And then saved up like 10 grand, but it took me a whole year. Right. And so now I haven't spent, and now I make more money per week. I make actually about double. I make double per week what I made my first year in trucking I averaged about 900 a week after taxes that first year. I'm at 1,800 a week right now to my pocket. And I view the 20,000 liquid the same way I viewed the 10,000. Right. Except, I was still, I guess, thinking about, well, I make a certain amount of money. And so now I need to figure out what to do with this 10,000. And I actually bought 6 ounces of gold with it, which people are like, yeah, that's great. 6 ounces of gold it's like $9,600. Yeah, well, I don't have the gold. I sold it, and in fact, I lost like $600 because I didn't even keep it long enough to cover the spread. But what I learned from that experience was a good lesson, which is it's liquidity. The benefit of the 10,000 or the 20,000 is that it's liquid, meaning it gives me flexibility and options. I can do things with it. If I go sink it into, a an illiquid asset, now I've just sank my liquidity. Like, what's the point of that? For what? What was accomplished? And so that shows you kind of the boomer brainwashing, and some of that's kind of bled over into some of the more MAGA so-called right-leaning types. It's kind of bled over into them, this idea of precious metals and maybe lead and firearms, which is I went down that rabbit hole myself. That's fine, but don't have any of that either. But that's a whole other topic, especially spiritually. But I don't. I won't even get into it. But so probably, although I can't say for sure, because I won't really know till it's go time. Because what's different this time around with quitting the job and moving into a hotel is it was very difficult for me to motivate myself enough to take an Uber to where I had parked the truck and trailer just to be able to do something I wasn't supposed to do, which is I dropped the trailer on the street at the delivery because I'd only delivered the first of 3 drops. So I took it, 2 miles away from where the hotel is, left it on the street. The rescue driver was going to be there that night, but I was supposed to sleep in the truck and meet up with him. And the company doesn't say this, but they want me staying with the trailer so it doesn't get towed or stolen. Right. Well, that's not my problem if it gets towed or stolen. It's not my problem. Okay. In the short run, it is if I'm trying to get home. See, and this is where trucking intersects with, mommy and, the children and a life and bills and the domestic life. If I'm a trucker who's trying to get home so mommy won't be mad at me, then I pretty much have to stay with the trailer because it'll be a complete and total disaster if it gets towed or stolen. Because now I can't get home to mommy and she's pissed. And that's, the entirety of most truckers. That's a lot of their motivation is to get home for whatever reason. I don't have that motivation. I'm already there. So I found it extremely difficult to even do that. And then the owner calls me the next morning wanting to know, hey man, what the fuck? And I'm just like, so you're wanting me to go back there and take the trailer out of the dock? Because I knew that's what was going to happen. The only thing that was going to happen was whether he gave me a talking to or not. At a certain point, he's going to be calling me saying, hey, the second drop's been unloaded. We need you to go hook up to that trailer and pretty please with sugar on top if it's not too much trouble. Could you drive 4 hours north into a Wisconsin fucking snowstorm in a winter wonderland and watch out for the myriad of snowmobiles crossing the highway in front of you? First time I've seen that. Pretty cool if you ask me, but that's the whole thing up there. And of course, none of us even realized it's like, because they're in Chicago and I'm wherever I may be, and it's like we didn't even know that was a winter wonderland, because you have 3 or 4 winters in a row where it doesn't snow that heavy, and it's like everybody forgets how much it snows in certain parts of the country, I guess. And guess who did it without complaint? Because I'm good at driving in the snow. I mean, at a certain point, it was just like I had to just stop in town somewhere, and it was just like, well, I guess I'm kind of blocking the street, but I got to take a piss. Like there's just nowhere to stop, Like, well, I got to take a leak, but and I got I got it unloaded, and some of these places we don't go very often. Apparently, I don't know. I think we've probably only delivered there a few times, and they wanted me to back in off the alley, and I did. There's cars and shit in the way. There's big piles of snow in the way. I just fucking did. It took like 20 minutes. I did it. It's fine. And then by then, and remember, they were still wanting me to pick up. They were wanting me to get loaded in northern fucking Wisconsin in a snowstorm, and then or deadhead me to God knows where in a fucking snowstorm. Meanwhile, I'm out of hours on my 70. Like I can't even get loaded. And then by then they didn't even ask me. They just, I guess they finally realized, oh, he's just gonna drive the 4 hours back to his hotel. Like we don't, maybe he's still quitting. We don't even know. Right. And so now they're just trying to strong arm me and talk to me like it's kind of a given that I'm going back to work. Right. Which is like, I've learned to just sort of just let them believe whatever they're going to believe because I think they're figuring out, well, Benton's going to do, he's going to do whatever he's going to do. But at the end of the day, he will do what he's able to do to get freight delivered. And if he glitches out and can't hit a dock, he's just going to glitch out. He's going to not hit the dock. I'm not going to waste my fucking effort on impossible tasks, trying to back in off the road, blindside to set up for a backing maneuver that's comically fucking ridiculous because of the tiny amount of space to work with while people come flying into the property and adjacent properties at up to 50 miles an hour in their personal vehicles. Like this is just total insanity. And like I told the dispatcher, I said, listen, I'm losing interest in doing this. I'm actually just losing interest in this. At a certain point, it's like, hey, I like my nutritional supplements. For what I spent on a week in this hotel, I could buy every single nutritional supplement that I'm laying eyes on right now. I could throw them all in the dumpster and then a week from now, buy all of them back just for what I spent to stay in this hotel for a week. Right. So what's the fucking difference? I can just wander away from this truck anytime I want. And the owner was right because the owner told me he's hinting around at certain things, maybe he's bluffing a little bit, but he's like, I suspect that if you quit this job, you might be done in trucking. And I think he's trying to imply that my record, he might blackball me in some whatever way he's able to blackball me, and maybe he would. But I think that Sun Transportation Systems probably blackballed me in whatever way they can blackball me because I've never had this much trouble getting a trucking job because other than my spotty employment history as far as quitting jobs, but that's normal. Truckers quit jobs. But I've never job hopped, meaning I've never quit one job and immediately started another one. They hate that. I've never done it. And other than my first job, I don't even look for other jobs while I'm working my present job, meaning when I worked for Schneider, I didn't understand that every single time I applied to a job and they ran my record or whatever, that Schneider got notified. So at a certain point, I'm just like talking to the dispatchers and the managers at the OC, the terminal in Dallas, and they're like, well, yeah, we understand you're kind of having this certain attitude, but don't you know that every time you apply to one of these other jobs, we get notified? And I'm like, no, I had no idea. And yeah, I see why you don't like that. And in fact, I think I'm just going to knock it the fuck off because I honestly didn't know that y'all had any idea about it. It's really none of your business. But now that I see that you're actually notified of it, yeah, of course, I chose not to do that anymore. Because to me, that's just a shitty thing to do. It's like, oh, so I'll just quit, right? But I'll quit, and then now I've got a liquid money, right? Pops. I didn't invest it in, God knows what. I didn't invest it in illiquid assets, so-called assets, right? What am I going to do? Break my teeth trying to bite into an ounce of gold? I mean, what's the point of that? And like for what? Oh, the dollar's going to collapse. They've been saying that shit since 1960. They were saying that in the mid 80s. Look, the dollar is going to be propped up until the exact moment that Moloch's machine and the fucking hellscape decides to get rid of the dollar. So, you want to talk about nobody knows the day or the hour. None of us knows that day or hour. So what's the fucking difference? And oh, well, oops, I left $6 grand in the account that I could have had cash. So what? Who cares? I mean, is it unfortunate? Sure. Big fucking deal. If I pay $4,000 for a car with liability insurance and then I crash it a month from now, it's kind of the same thing anyway, right? Or if somebody crashes into it, I could park it on the street, walk away for an hour. And in fact, when I was in LA, somebody had a wreck and pretty close to my car that, they could have just totaled my car. None of that's a given that I'm just going to wake up tomorrow and there's going to be 6 G's in my account. Maybe there won't be. I'm fine with that. I'd rather have the money, but this is not a secure world in that way. But anyway, moral of the story, I never got around to the spiritual attack when the owner called me. But I'm going to go get something to eat. Thanks for watching. Bye.